Good to see you again.
Good to see you, Alex. Nice to see you.
It's been quite some time.
It has. It has. Yeah, we missed an opportunity last week to have. Hold on, this is about to fucking start again. Just in time, I stopped the music before we got the full intro again. Yeah, we missed last week, and also if you're listening to this, I chose not to put out the mock draft simulator live stream as a podcast because I felt like there was just no way it was going to translate to audio only. So for some people, they haven't heard from us at all in 2 weeks. For the YouTube subscribers, you might have seen something recently.
Did how did the mock draft go?
So it's just a mock draft simulator. I did 5 different mock draft simulators. Have you ever used a mock draft simulator?
No, I have not. The closest I've ever come is back in the day when ESPN had their trade machine. You remember the trade machine?
Yeah.
And it would just accept and reject wild trades all over the place. I would play around with that because I thought that was fun. But no, I'm not a draft simulator type person, so not for me.
So it's never been easier. There's never been more options. There's a bunch of cool stuff, and it was basically just going through as the Seahawks for 7 rounds. And trying to do what I would do if I was their GM based on the limited, I'll tell you this, my draft process is I'm not out grinding tape. I read a lot of scouting reports. I read a lot of mock drafts. I'm very interested in the prospects, but I'm not I don't claim to be, I really get frustrated when it's oh, this is a dude who works as a gas station attendant. And I'm supposed to hear his opinion on all 22 that he's apparently watching while he's cleaning the toilets at the, you know what I mean? I'm not that guy.
But here's the thing. To me, you and that person, I'd say half a degree of separation. You're basically in the same bucket. And that's no knock on them or you. That's just how I see it. Draft guys, my wife and I talk about this type of person a lot. Not draft guy, but information guy. Information guy and reply guy. There's certain types of online personas. Reply guys, they just reply to everything on Twitter. It's everything that's been posted on Twitter was personally directed to them. If they happen to follow it and it's on their feed, it's it was personally given to them.
Speaking of which, you can comment on this live stream, and we will respond to it as though you're in the podcast with us.
See, that's the thing. If you're a reply guy, this is a show like this.
This is your moment.
Avenue, because we will actually acknowledge you. I get it. I understand what reply guys' purpose in life is. It's just to be acknowledged. That their parents didn't acknowledge them growing up, or their spouse doesn't acknowledge them now, or their kids hate them. I don't know what it is, but they just need some sort of validation, and that's why they reply to everything. And
you're projecting a lot onto these guys that feels a little bit autobiographical.
Hey, maybe I'm in that group too. But reply guy is one type of person. Information guy is another. Information guy just has info on to me it's the scene from Superbad when McLovin's walking down the hallway following the girl he has a crush on. Nicola, I think is her name. And she turns around to see why this guy's creeping on her, and he goes, it's 10:15 or whatever the time is that he tells him. And then he goes and tells his buddies, and to him that was a meaningful interaction. Well, that's what information guy is online. He's basically just the dude creeping around, and when somebody needs info, there he is. Doesn't matter if you wanted the info or not, it's there for you from information guy. So then draft guy is kind of very close to information guy. It's I guess my question would be, who asked for this? But you can say the same thing about everything we're doing right now.
I know. That's what I was going to say. That's, if you ask that before any podcast got created, there'd be 7 really bad podcasts that existed, and the rest of us would all be sitting around forced to watch Seth Meyers or somebody like that do your boy Seth Meyers do a podcast. So one of the things that we missed out on, and I said I pledged to not talk about it until you and I were together, and then your monkeypox spread to your anus, and we had to postpone for
Oh,
yet
we were
another.
very sick. We were very sick last week. My family is we are the testing ground for all forms of COVID.
Gotcha.
If COVID has existed in any new variant, we are the first. We're the beta testers. We try it
Yes,
out before everybody else and somehow survive it. So it can't be that bad, right?
that's right. You're saying it's a hoax. I think a lot of people agree with you right now.
We've had COVID a lot and got it again recently.
Damn, that sucks. So how was the baby with COVID?
Very good actually. Outside
Yeah,
of a fever the one day, yeah, it's. I will say we are vaccinated, so you can take that information and
Ooh.
do with it as you will. But the alternative, I guess, could be that we could have ended up dead if the vaccine never
Yeah.
existed. So
I mean, I think the
uh,
reality is at this stage, neither death is likely or some crazy outcome from the vaccine. I will say when my daughter was like 1.5 when she first got COVID, that we're like certain of like a positive test. Is that right? Yeah, I think that's right. And it like supercharged her. Like kids just do not get affected the same way adults do. I had it one confirmed time and one other time that was like early, but I was doing a lot of travel and there were some like in retrospect some very like hallmark symptoms of COVID. And by the way, this probably is gonna. They're like YouTube's like, please don't talk about this. This is the like we said vaccine and COVID in the first couple minutes, and they're like, please shut the fuck up. We're suppressing.
you're gonna ruin the algorithm. Yeah.
The algorithm hates us. But yeah, I don't get it very bad. I feel bad for the people that do, and I have no doubt that. I mean, I don't think you have a lot of motivation to do this podcast, but I do think you have motivation to leave your house. So, I feel bad for folks that get hit with it pretty hard because I felt kind of shitty. I did lose my sense of smell. I'll say that. Felt shitty for like one day and was just kind of like a little lethargic for another day, and then after that, I was like pretty much good. My wife, I've told this story maybe on this podcast, maybe not. When my wife and my daughter first got it, I was like, well, I'm going to get it. I live in the same house. We're not masking. We're not doing any of that stuff. I'm going to help take care of you guys. I'm not going to do any separation. And then when I got it and they didn't get it, because I never got it during that period. I tested every day, never got it. I assumed I would get it. I was willing. The only thing I did different was I slept in our guest bedroom. And then when I got it, they made me separate. I had to mask. I slept in the guest bedroom. I did all the shit that they didn't have to do. And but she was like, you can come down and eat dinner with us. Just sit. We'll like sit on opposite. All this fake science shit that nobody knows if it does anything. But
The early stages of COVID were kind of nice because
this was like July of 2022, though. This was too late to be. But anyways, the funny thing to me was she was like, you don't have to have a mask on if you're drinking. It was like a restaurant in there. And so I was just like getting hammered every night because I was like, if I have a gin and tonic in my hand, I don't have to have a mask on. So, yeah, I was.
Are you the type of person? I used to have a friend. This is kind of veering down a different road here, but I used to have a friend that every time he got a cold, swore that shots of vodka would help cure his cold. The
Absolutely
alcohol
not,
would
no.
just get inside him, and for whatever reason, that made him feel better. And
Absolutely not. No,
I'm the type of person that if I have even a cold, I do not want an alcoholic beverage.
This is going to be surprising to you, but I won't even drink if I'm in a bad mood. I really have to be like, I drink when I'm happy and I want to taste it. And it's not for medicinal purposes or for therapy purposes. It's got for me, it has zero extra benefit outside of the ritual, the taste. And like, I don't even love being drunk that much. I mean, I deal with it. Don't get me wrong, but I'm not like, I don't drink for effect really at all.
No, I don't. The people that drink when they are sick, to me,
Crazy.
are like it's like Nicolas Cage in Leaving Las Vegas, just pounding the bottle of whiskey in the shower. Like that is who you are to me. If you are drinking when you get sick, and I'm not judging you. If that's what you like to do, that's fine. I'm just saying how I see you in my mind is like this guy who's trying to drink himself to death in a movie, Academy Award winning movie. So I guess there's that, but. I don't know if that's any consolation.
I mean, it affects me zero. I don't drink when I'm sick. I think what those people you're talking about are called is alcoholics.
That might be it. Yes, I have known some of those. Okay. Oh, dude, I gotta ask you because we haven't talked since you went on your very first trip, your virginal experience to the happiest place in the world,
Yes.
Disneyland. And I have to know. I forget the kid. I don't care about the kid. I care what you thought about Disneyland being your first time there as an adult man.
I've discovered that I think I missed the part where I could enjoy it like a child, and I just marveled at it like a dad would, where I was like, it's pretty amazing that all of this exists. That 100 years ago, an anti-Semite drew a mouse, and now there's this full industry. And I'm not like patriotic blindly, you know what I mean? But it was kind of a thing where you're like, it's when like Vegas is similar to this, my experience in Vegas, where it's like, this isn't really for me. But the fact that this exists is such a testament to like the will of America. You know what I mean? Like it's just like I was trying to explain it to my friend. I'm like, imagine if you did something that was so pivotal to American culture that like many years from now, some guy has to design 8 identical fake submarines for a Finding Nemo ride. They don't have to be real submarines, but they still have to like hold water out like a submarine, and they have to feel enough like a real submarine on the inside for the experience. Like, or all these like, you know, all these it's just like a crazy, every part of it is like, so you're just like, how much money does this cost to make this? It's got to be millions for every fucking ride. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's pretty amazing. I mean, it's obviously like it's all commercialized bullshit. It's Times Square in New York is the same way, where you're like, I mean, this is all obviously like capitalism gone awry or whatever you feel about that. It's like, but it's like, it is like amazing. It's also, by the way, in our defense as fat, ugly Americans, everything that we view as culturally relevant other places is some expression of excess. Like the pyramids were because these fucking insecure pharaohs wanted to die with some monument to them. You know what I mean? Like it's not that's some bullshit the same as Walt Disney has Disneyland. So I don't even feel bad about it really, but it's I thought it was cool, but probably for different reasons than I would have if it was when I was a kid.
That got real deep.
Yeah.
A lot.
I also, by the way, we had an Uber driver who was telling me that she's like, I hate Disney, and I was like, oh, okay. Like she's like driving us to Disney, and I'm like, okay. She's like, I'm from Egypt. I've never been to the pyramids, and I was like, no shit. She's like, yeah, when you live by them, you don't go there. Same as Disney. I would never come here, and I'm like, okay, thank you. I guess.
Okay, that is also that Uber experience is similar to my very many Uber experiences in Vegas, where every person who lives there wants to tell you how much they hate it, and you're like, well, then why do you don't do this then? You can go
live
anywhere.
somewhere else.
There's a whole world out there where this is one place you don't have to live.
Yeah.
But okay, so beyond all the very deep Disney experiences, did you have a favorite ride? Did you go on a ride where you were like, I enjoy this?
Yes. So your recommendation to me was the Indiana Jones ride, and my it became obvious very early in the trip that was not going to work for my daughter, and the whole thing was geared around my daughter. So we didn't even stand in line for it. There were a couple. She had like some experiences with when she wanted to meet the characters, but anytime it was a person who was not in a full costume, like it was Aladdin was just a dude dressed like Aladdin, but the genie was like in a full head to toe. You couldn't see a human's face.
Right.
She was into that, but when there was a human there, it was like, we're out on this. Certain rides she like really hated. We tried to stay for the fireworks show both nights we were there. The first night, we wait for like 30 minutes in a really thick crowd of people, right? And when it's like just starts, she goes, I feel like I'm going to throw up. And then we had to like escape, right? And it was like very upsetting. The second night, we like did all this planning and build up and like, okay, we're not going to hold you up. We're not going to eat a whole bunch. We want to feel good when this is happening. And then she freaked out like 10 minutes before. And then as a consolation prize, they canceled the pyrotechnic portion because of wind. So everybody suffered because of my daughter is the way that I'd like to. But my favorite ride, to answer your question, was probably the Pirates of the Caribbean ride.
Okay. Yeah, that's a classic. Good one.
Yeah, I would say I was never going to go on a roller coaster. I don't like roller coasters. I'm not a thrill seeker in any way. I'm not an adrenaline junkie in any way. That's not what I'm anywhere for. Like at the fair, I've never even been on the big roller coaster. And I will never be on it. I've been on a couple. I would never now. I also like the older you get, man, your inner ear or whatever liquid gets thicker and you get I get motion sickness so fast now on stuff like that.
Sure. Yeah, no, I get it. Yeah, when you described this whole trip to me, I was like, see, I'm the type of person, I like Las Vegas. I
Sure.
like Disneyland. I like excess. I don't mind crowds. I can do those types of events and enjoy them. But when you described all the things that you like and don't like, and then told me where you were going, I was like, God, this does not sound like the right pairing. And
Sure.
it sounds like overall it went okay.
Yeah,
Maybe
my
that's
wife,
something that you need to do again.
part of it is like a lot of the problems you may have at Disneyland, you can throw money at a little bit. So like like, and I will say this about Disneyland, everything's a little bit expensive, but it's still way cheaper than the ballpark. Like the food is a little bit more expensive than you'd expect to pay at like an equivalent restaurant outside of Disneyland or outside of like I will say downtown Disney, the part that's not actually inside the park, that is overpriced and almost like to scam levels. Like it's crazy. We spent $100 on a meal at a brewery that should have been like $45.
Yeah,
but and it was like not great. But the inside
that's a good point. I would say what you're paying for at a place like Disneyland or any kind of tourist trap really is like below Applebee's level.
Well, but no, what I will say actually is I think the food was good. Like everything, every part of it, you were like, it was quality. It was like, we got like a Mexican food. I'm not telling you it's some authentic or life-changing dish, but you're like, when you go to a baseball game, you expect to spend like 4 times as much as it should cost and for the quality to be dog shit. And this was like 2 times as much as it should cost, but it was like fine. It was like good. It was like not, and all the like, we bought, $1,000 worth of merch and shit. And it's all like, oh, it's like a good quality t-shirt. You go to a baseball game anymore with the Fanatics deal, you almost expect that thing to, you're going to see your nipples through it day one.
I gotta ask, did you buy any Disney apparel for yourself?
You know what? The original plan, had you not pretended like the hoax hit you last week, was I was going to come onto this podcast. I bought one, it's a snapback hat with Mickey's like doing a peace sign on it. Mickey's hand doing a peace sign on it, which is very much like, I think you would wear it even. Well, you wore a Coug hat. Your standards for hats have gone way down.
Hat is a good choice. Hat's a good choice.
And then my wife forced me to buy or convinced me to buy a Disneyland 2024 shirt. But again, it's like black it's like relatively simple compared to, but yeah, I got a little bit, but not as much. I spent more. Every single other person that we bought stuff for got more money spent on them than me.
I always laugh. It's dudes especially. Like women. I see women wearing Disney stuff all the time out in public. You can make it look good. Kids, obviously, you're a kid. You're gonna wear that. You're gonna wear the hell out of it. But guys, middle-aged guys, it's like when you get sucked into the trap when you're there and you're like, everybody else is wearing a Disneyland sweatshirt. Why shouldn't I? And then you buy something with Goofy's face on it. And as soon as you leave that park and get home, you're like, what the hell did I buy this for? I will never wear this again. Nobody can see me in this outside of Disneyland or I will look like a fool.
Yes, fully agree. I'm gonna try to show this hat in a way that I'm hoping it's on eBay. So I'm hoping I don't somehow accidentally give away some part of my identity. But yeah, this is the hat that I bought. Come on, baby. Can you see?
Yes, it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's great. It's like
it's a pretty normal. You wouldn't know necessarily that it's a Disney hat.
Right,
it's
exactly.
Just a peace sign with cartoon hands. That's all you can tell.
Yeah, if my goal was something that I may ever consider wearing again, and it's probably going to be limited to podcast, like on camera wearing. It's probably not going to make it out in the wild very often. Also, by the way, some of that stuff at Disneyland, I was like, sometimes they're selling you a toy that you could buy at Target for like fucking
that's all it is.
1/4 of the price.
Almost everything.
But some of the stuff is Disneyland exclusive, and so I felt okay being like, here's $30 for hat. Also $30 for a hat. Again, it's like, it's not really that expensive for a hat to be $30, and it's quality. It's like, you would, if you got the same quality Mariners hat, you'd be happy with.
Sure. Okay. We have belabored the Disneyland talk enough. I will cede my time to you. What are we talking about today?
We got a lot, and we got to try to fit it into what? I think a 2:30 out. Is that the?
We've got an hour and 9 minutes.
Okay, so we lost one of our heroes. Well, actually, while I was in Disneyland, I had to wake up to the news that O.J. Simpson had passed away, and we'll talk about that briefly. Tom Brady fanned the flames of the rumor mill, much like the early retirement of Brett Favre, the early years of Brett Favre's retirement, where every year they would ask him if he was ready to come back. The Seahawks had a scandal that has rocked the Legion of Boom and the fan base, and I want to talk about that because they started taking down pictures in the locker room or the common areas of the practice facility, and it's caused some controversy. And then you and I are both Jerry DePoto haters. I think skeptics or critics. I will say there was one move that you were very critical of that I'd like to re-examine at this point, and another one that I left off the list because my argument was less strong by the time we started doing this podcast. So, and then finally, Caitlin Clark got a shoe deal. It's led to some like really awful takes, expected takes from people on both sides of the political spectrum. One of them being a person who I actually respect a lot as a broadcaster and as a journalist. Jemele Hill, though I disagree with her a lot of times, and I think she was wrong on this one. But let's start with, there used to be a time where I thought we'll play the home run game if we have time. We're going to try to have time. There used to be a time when I thought a great idea for a podcast would be to create a podcast where every time O.J. Simpson tweeted, and it was always videos, that you make a podcast episode about that tweet. These aren't going to be long episodes, obviously, and unfortunately, along with O.J. Simpson, that dream has died.
I as soon as I heard the news that he had passed, you were the first person I thought of, because no one seems to idolize this man the way you do.
He's done nothing wrong in his life. You and I have talked about so there's a couple things. One, originally his estate was going to contest the Goldman.
Yeah.
Sorry.
R.I.P. Jesus.
Well, the other thing that it did, by the way, is I got to watch like a lot of Norm Macdonald stuff. Did you sent me one?
I was the one who sent you that article. You might have seen other articles, but it was some publication that wrote about how Norm Macdonald was O.J. Simpson's greatest all-time hater, which is probably accurate, and a lot of good material he got out of O.J.
Sure. Man, the ultimate, like, if you talk about my dream gig, when Norm Macdonald is at the ESPYs and he's talking about you can't lose your Heisman unless you decapitate your wife and a waiter or something like that, and watching like Ken Griffey Jr. be like, oh, like bombing in front of Ken Griffey Jr. with a great joke is my ultimate dream. Yeah, I mean, it's like, I don't know. It's funny because there's like a segment of people who are like, seem to just be willing to at least do the mental gymnastics to say he was innocent. I think there's a somewhat compelling conspiracy theory that his son committed the murder, and he was covering up for his son. I don't know what that does. Like, net is still these two people got brutally murdered, so I don't know that there's like, that's to me not a happy ending. You seem like you're like, I don't know what
I'm thinking about this.
It feels like double Dutch, where you're like, you want to jump in, but you're like, I might ruin my life. I don't know.
To me, what OJ, his legacy is, and this is like, obviously assuming he did what most people think he did.
Sure.
Very bad. That man, if you believe in an afterlife, is probably in a bad place right now.
Sure. I think that's listen, I'm willing to take the stance that murdering your wife is bad.
Yes.
I will also take that stance.
Yes.
Bravely, proudly.
Aside from all that, I would say, as somebody who doesn't take much of anything seriously or necessarily expect people to take me seriously, OJ to me and probably to you too, it's kind of a generational thing. He was the first person where I've ever seen it just be like open season on jokes immediately. And it kicked off like an entire generation for us of just a different type of humor, I would say. Like up till OJ, it seemed like there was some sort of decorum in humor where, you know, you have to let enough time pass before you really go in on the dark joke. With OJ, it was immediate. And maybe that's credit to Norm Macdonald, who had a wide-ranging platform at that point in time on SNL where he could really kind of let these jokes go to the point that it got him fired.
Yeah.
But after OJ, it's like then you have the Bill Clinton scandal. And there's like this 5-year period in the mid to late 90s where the time that you usually have between when it's okay to make a joke about certain things just disappears entirely. And then that kind of leads into the social media era in the early 2000s. That kind of brings us to where we are now, where it's like now anybody can do almost anything and there are immediate jokes about it. Whether
Yeah, I guess
good or bad, you know, like, and it feels like it started with OJ.
I think the other thing that OJ, because there were other like high profile murders of celebrity spouses that were like presumed to be that person that they got away with in the past. That's not like the first time that's ever happened, but the kind of unfortunate thing for OJ and the fortunate thing for us as parts of the culture are the internet was like just coming about at that time. Like I think I probably either had the internet. I was like a very early internet family. I either had it or was like we were about to get it pretty soon. And so like that kind of stuff got to spread around for years. Like OJ was a punchline. I think like in comedy there's a thing where like if someone there's like a kind of a trope of someone still telling a Monica Lewinsky joke this late after.
Right.
But there's like, I mean, fucking Dave Chappelle was doing jokes about OJ like recently. Like, and nobody, because I think it's like he just never left the consciousness where like Monica Lewinsky and Bill Clinton left the consciousness for a couple years, and then eventually they made it back, and now, but yeah, like that kind of stuff almost just doesn't leave anymore, and that's the
that was OJ's own doing too. I mean, this is like the thing about OJ that became pretty clear, I think, as time went by, is that he was kind of a narcissist. Like, you know, most people, if they commit a murder, they're going to lay low for a while. This guy did like the exact opposite. I mean,
well, what would you, but I mean, if he's trying to convince the world, albeit unsuccessfully, that he didn't commit the murder, like I think what you're saying is he didn't act like someone who committed a murder, which is, I
guess that's fair. Yeah. He didn't follow the usual, the playbook, I guess.
I saw a tweet that was like, OJ can finally rest in peace knowing that the man who killed his wife is dead or something like that, which is such a great,
I mean, in the aftermath of his death, I mean, within minutes, there was like tons of amazing jokes. And of course it's like, I would have to imagine if you were close to that guy personally, like, it's just a very mixed reaction. Like, obviously you're sad that your loved one has passed away,
right?
But like any open-minded, sensible person has to understand like the conflict that's going to follow this type of person around forever and ever and ever. And just, I mean, how do you even reason with that in your own mind? You know, like to be able to have a grasp on what occurred and like handle it in the way that makes logical sense to you as a person more than anything else.
I will say about OJ, I found that the ratio of like funny to serious was pretty high, which I appreciate too. Like, you remember when Antonin Scalia died? That he was a Supreme Court justice, and everyone's like, but half the world is like, you know, they're either making jokes or they're like, this is a man, he has a family, and I kind of agree. I get that point. Like, he does have a family, and I think like Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, and like the tables turned and politically, and everyone was like outraged that someone would make a joke about Ruth Bader Ginsburg if you're whatever. And you know who didn't have that same animosity towards the other person? Like, those two were friends, but they both were involved in like really shitty, tough decisions because they had played an important role in our countries for like, you know, present evolution. OJ did none of that. He just was a football player who was like an actor, and we just immediately went to full speed jokes. Like, literally, the man has been I was going back and like laughing because his most recent videos were like, I'm not in hospice, I'm feeling great, and then he's just dead 2 months later. And I don't know why that's funny. Like, it's horrific that a man died, but also it's
Yeah,
a guy who like I guess that's the other thing is like I'm not celebrating his death. I
and
think
so, in some ways, there's a part of humor and comedy in general where, in order for it to be successful, you have to kind of be in on the joke, right? Like if you're telling the joke, you have to
Sure.
be on it too, or else it just doesn't make sense. Otherwise, you might as well just be reciting somebody else's material. And OJ seemed to be in on the joke, because if he wasn't in on the joke, the videos would have gone away. He would have found his way out of the spotlight, or he would have found his way into the spotlight with a different demeanor, right? Like he would have been angry in the spotlight instead of constantly jovial for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And it seemed like he was in on the joke, or at least he understood his place in the comedic universe. And maybe that came from his acting career. I don't know. He was in a bunch of comedy movies. I don't know what it is, but that guy, for whatever reason, seemed to understand. And at the same time, like, if you loved him or you hated him or whatever, somewhere in between, or were even apathetic, you were aware of his existence. I guess that says something.
Yeah. So rest in peace to a legend. Love the man. I mean, I don't know, whatever. It's, he's nothing we do or say is going to undo the horrific things he said. So let's get a laugh,
Yeah.
So I skipped this intentionally, but we can kind of fold it in together. There's been just like so much Patriots talk. Tom Brady is like not opposed to making a late season return to the NFL if a team needs him or wants him, and that's of course if he is a team owner by then, if that is even possible, etc. It's just so much speculation, and he's fanning the flames a little bit, and then we find out that Robert Kraft supposedly contacted the Atlanta Falcons and told them not to hire Bill Belichick, which that kind of reminded me of a thing that happens in comedy also, which is everybody's like, comics are, unfortunately, like Bill Belichick has an accomplished career. Most comics have never done anything of worth, right? And so they don't have enough self-confidence to just like take the world as it's given to them. They have to feel like there's some conspiracy against them or whatever. It's like a common thing where people think that they're like, oh, if I show loyalty to this club or this booker or whatever, they'll be in my favor. But if I show loyalty to this other one, they're going to dislike me. And the reality is the owners are probably more likely to be friends with and trust other owners who they're competing against than the people who coached under them. They're like essentially their coworkers or their employees. And this feels like pretty shitty to me that Robert Kraft, to me, it feels like you took a guy who has been pivotal to your franchise's success, and there's obviously been a falling out of some type. And obviously also, I think it's at this point we can close the book on, it's obvious that the Krafts made the wrong decision on who to stick with, whether it was Brady or Belichick. Like, they fucked that up for sure. But that's their fault, not Bill Belichick's fault that they made that decision.
Yeah. I think what we know about billionaires is that they can be real assholes. Yeah. And it's unfortunate because you have to get close to them if you want to be even a millionaire, it seems like.
But here's the thing. They can be real assholes. Yeah. So can thousandaires and hundreds. They just don't have any impact.
They just don't have the same type of pull. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. It's like if a billionaire has the type of pull that they do, it's like it's the scene in Horrible Bosses when Jason Bateman threatens to quit his job and Kevin Spacey, who's his boss, says, I'll call everybody around town and make sure you never get hired there. And it's like, well, that's whether that's true or not, just the threat of that is kind of what happened to Bill Belichick. It seems like, right? Like he lost out on the opportunity to coach again. Maybe it was because of his own doing, or maybe it was because of his previous boss. But either way, something didn't work out there. Yeah, I mean, it's shady. I mean, what I guess the more interesting topic that you brought up at the beginning was Tom Brady. And while he is making these claims that he would want to return, I think the reality of Tom Brady right now is that he's just trying to promote the Netflix roast of Tom Brady, which I didn't even know was a thing until I
Me
saw
either.
it.
He did it. Wow.
Yeah.
Through
It
you.
was,
It took you to bring it to my
well,
attention.
I saw it pop up as something that was coming my way on Netflix as of yesterday or 2 days ago, and I was like,
Wow.
okay, now it makes sense that this guy's been talking about coming back or just doing things that would get attention, right? Like, because that's kind of that's what guys do. It's like the publicity tour. You have to spin up interest in yourself if there's something you have to promote. And for
Yeah.
Tom Brady, it's this stupid Netflix special, which is probably going to like net him $1 billion or something like that.
Sure.
And if he can get people interested in it by talking about potentially coming back to the NFL, then he'll do what he has to do. And maybe he does. Maybe ultimately Tom Brady does come back now that he is a single man, a divorcee, with kids that he apparently doesn't spend time with. The sky's the limit for him, I guess.
So let's imagine. He mentioned a couple teams that he would be interested in. He mentioned Las Vegas, who he's I think going to become part owner of. Is the thought. San Francisco. He might have mentioned another team. I can't remember, but let's say Seahawks 10-4. Geno Smith leg falls off. Sam Howell gets the OJ Simpson treatment. There's no quarterbacks available. Hopefully Michael Penix is gets the opportunity to start for them, but let's say that doesn't happen. There's no third quarterback on the roster. What's your feeling if week 15 or 16 in this, obviously fake scenario, Tom Brady decides to suit up for the Seahawks? Do you think he has enough left to be an NFL quarterback?
No, I would never.
It's over?
I wouldn't want him on my team. And I'm sure there are people.
Too attractive?
Too attractive, yes.
Yeah.
Much too good looking. No, man. It just feels like when those types of things happen and you go out and you sign the hired gun veteran like that, it's either a publicity stunt a lot of times or it's a desperation move. If your team's in that situation where that's your only option, then you have a lot of problems.
Yeah.
Just a lot of problems. And I don't think a guy like that is necessarily going to solve them when he's been away from the game for a couple of years. And it's one of those things where you're hoping to catch lightning in a bottle. It's like every time a major golf tournament comes up, how everyone gets all amped up about Tiger Woods again. It's like there's nothing to necessarily get you amped about Tiger. Like none of the events he's been playing on prior to that major seem to indicate that he's going to storm out of nowhere and win the Masters or whatever it might be. But everybody tries to convince themselves of it, right? Fans try to convince themselves of it. That'd be the same thing if a team were to take a chance on Tom Brady at this point. It'd be like, you're going to convince yourself that this guy's going to win another championship because you've seen him do it before. But all signs point to him not being able to do that based on the current circumstances. So, yeah. For me, it'd be a no. It's a no from me, dog.
I'd be okay with it. I also hope that and we're going to spend. By the way, big announcement, folks. If you're Alex may or may not be involved in it at this point. We're trying to hammer out some details. He's got a real strict contract negotiator at his house. But on Thursday, we are going to be doing a live stream of the day one of the NFL draft. Seahawks pick 16th. And my commitment is to stream at least until the Seahawks pick. It is time away from my family for you, the listener. So please listen, because if you don't listen, we have to quit the podcast forever. And two is, we'll make it that long to the Seahawks pick, and we'll talk about all the stuff that's going on. But I have a couple of comedian friends that are interested in doing it, so hopefully we'll get them on also. Hopefully Alex can escape his baby long enough to do it. At the very minimum, if we could just get you on some earbuds and we don't have to see the baby. I'm not trying to dox this baby, but we can hear parenting occurring while we're watching the draft. I'm on board with that too.
The only thing I ever like about the draft is just like making fun of. I like to people watch in general, and the draft is a really good excuse for that. I like to make fun of the fans that they show on TV, because there's always some really good fan reactions. A couple years ago, when the Seahawks drafted Boye Mafe, it's one of my favorite fan reactions of all time. This woman in a full Seahawks gear at the draft, they pan to her in the crowd, and you can see her mouth the words, "Who's Boye Mafe?" and then immediately go, "Woo!" when she realizes she's on camera. So without hesitation, she goes, "I don't know who this person is," to cheering excitedly because she knows she's on camera. That's like the perfect the perfect example of what the draft is when you're a fan. It's like you have no idea who these players are, but you're gonna cheer for them like they might as well be Tom Brady, right? Like you do what you have to do as a fan.
Yeah, well, one thing I will say is I get frustrated by the fans who are like, it's not really a question of do I like the pick or not. It's like, who do I have to be enthusiastic about next? You know what I mean? Like they're going to be enthusiastic because, or people who I think on average just hate it every time. Also, by the way, Mike Hansen, comedian, is one of the guys I've considered. Not anymore. He's off the list, but he's a guy that likes the Seahawks a lot and is a big Huskies fan also. So Mike, you're on the list. Oh boy. You're going to have to wait long, and they're going to trade down. This is Ben Coog, by the way, who's coming to see me in Prineville, Oregon on Saturday. He said that might be a lie by the time the show actually comes around. I don't know if he's actually purchased his tickets yet, but I'll be in Seattle at Comedy/Bar on Capitol Hill on Friday and at the Pine Theater in Prineville, Oregon on Saturday.
That's a quick turnaround drive-wise. That's going to be a long Saturday for you, I imagine.
I mean, I did. I was in Spokane and Post Falls 2 straight nights and came home after. You do a lot of driving as a comedian. This is like par for the course, pretty much. Prineville won't be too bad. The only thing you can't do is like I can't have a single beer while I'm there, which is unfortunate because I will be pissing every 3 miles if I drink at all while I'm there. But yeah. Anyway, so wait, what is the no lie? What was he saying no lie about? I do think, by the way, that the Seahawks are going to trade down. I hope they trade down. That's what I want them to do. We'll talk about it on that day, but we've had plenty of draft coverage in the last 7 days of this podcast. There will be more on Thursday, which is exciting for me. I love the draft. I will give you. On Thursday, we'll talk about there's like a handful of guys I'd be fine with the Seahawks picking at 16. But let's talk about, by the way, this. So the Seahawks in their, what would you describe? What has the room been described as in some, not lying. He'll be there on Saturday. That's what Ben Coog says. Hell yeah, Ben Coog. I'm going to kiss that guy. Not his wife, just him. He said he's not bringing me a Cougar hat, which is good because I would not wear it. I'm loyal to my favorite teams.
You can borrow mine.
So the Seahawks are removing some photos from the Pete Carroll era that have been blown up and posted in the VMAC, and it's caused uproar from former players. I don't think any current player cares. The media and similar media types like Pat McAfee has talked about it. The local guys have all talked about it. And I can't imagine. First off, what I would like to see is what did Pete Carroll keep from the Mike Holmgren era of, and granted, the Seahawks never won a Super Bowl under Mike Holmgren. They did go to a Super Bowl under Mike Holmgren. Mike Holmgren was a legendary Hall of Fame caliber coach. What did Pete Carroll keep, or was everyone pretty happy to move on from the recent era of relative mediocrity that we had experienced under Mike Holmgren? And I guess, like, obviously Pete Carroll's been here long enough that social media was a fraction of what it is now, and it made up such a smaller part of the sports landscape. But to me, this feels like an absolute nothing story that's been blown up into this thing where we're trying to figure out a reason to hate Mike Macdonald before he coaches a single game.
Oh, these stories are great. They're great for fans. They're great for radio or talking heads. They're great for the former players who want to remain relevant and have people care about their opinions still, which I think is a real big thing. I mean, if you've spent your whole life in the spotlight and suddenly you're not in it, you got to find a way back in. These types of stories help with that. But you're right. I mean, this is stupid. It's very stupid. Imagine if you redecorated your house and everybody that you know got mad that you redecorated your house, but you didn't really know why they were mad.
It's not even really that, though. It's like, imagine if you bought a house from somebody else and took down their decorations.
Right.
You know what like it's and also I don't know if you're aware of this part of it. They're putting up video boards that are going to have like photos of all eras of Seahawks football, including the present era, but also the Super Bowl era, also the Carroll era. He also took down the basketball hoop at the.
I think the players, the ex-players, are probably more pissed about the basketball.
Sure,
I would have to imagine than the pictures of times gone by. But I understand it, man. I mean, this is I guess I can see both sides. This is in my classic fashion. I can see both sides because
non-committal.
In some ways, the move, it could have been a very innocent thing that Mike Macdonald and his staff were doing, and maybe they had no idea it would inspire this type of reaction. But it also kind of feels like, every now and then you'll have a coach that comes in. I remember when Tyrone Willingham did this with the Huskies. You have a coach that comes in and says, we're taking the names off the back of the jerseys. You got to earn it. It's going to be, and you always see that there's always like one team in the NCAA tournament out of some nothing conference that you didn't even know was Division I, that this team has this going on where they got no names on the back of the jerseys. And I always think to myself, man, it'd be really cool if that tiny ass school had the players' names on the backs of the jerseys, because now they're on national TV and nobody has any clue who they are. Yeah. So it's one of those things where it's like, it almost felt like that type of move where a coach comes in and is like, you got to earn it. You got to earn everything. We're taking the names off the back of the jerseys. We're taking these photos of the past history down. And it's like, okay, buddy, like, we get it. We get it. You're trying to put your stamp on things, but at the same time, just maybe pull it back a little. You don't have to do as much. You don't have to do so much. Don't have to do so much. Just be a good coach and win, and no one's going to care what you do.
Yeah. Mike Hansen says, I want to say Bob Whitsitt did the same thing to the Seahawks. And that's kind of my point, is like, we just haven't seen someone make huge changes in Seattle for so long because there hasn't been a coaching change in Seattle for so long. I imagine this happens everywhere all the time. And yeah, it's all, I will say this, these kinds of things, when they start to become part of like the case against Mike Macdonald, and though Richard Sherman doesn't play for the Seahawks anymore, Cam Chancellor doesn't play for the Seahawks anymore, the guys that are outspoken about this, they don't play for the Seahawks anymore. And probably, I mean, like, the only remaining players in the NFL from the Super Bowl team are Bobby Wagner, who I think is unsigned. No, he went to Washington. I'm sorry. Bobby Wagner and Russell Wilson. Bobby Wagner is the only guy from that defense that had the Legion of Boom as part of it. These like, this is gone. This is a bygone era of the Seahawks. It's hard to admit, but it's gone. It's over.
It is interesting because, I mean, I kind of understand it from the fans. If you're a fan who's like, this pisses me off, I can kind of get it.
If they start taking banners down, I'll be mad. But if it's some shit inside the practice facility, I don't even see that.
I mean, it's such a stark contrast from like the Mariners, who have thrown 1995 and 2001 in your face for over 2 decades now.
Of course.
And it's like you're used to that. You're so
don't forget the Felix Perfect game also. Yeah. They love the
and that was 12 years ago now.
Right.
Yeah. So it's like you have one franchise that so rehashes the past because it's not even like that great of a past, honestly, but it's all they have because they're trying to distract you from what's usually a very bad present.
Yes.
And then you have an organization like the Seahawks that in one move is just going to kind of, they're not nuking the past, but they're just kind of changing the perspective and trying to put their own identity in the team and the franchise. And I understand that. And I think
either that or they're not, because they're putting up these video boards that are going to have the same fucking pictures on them anyway. It's like, it's such a, like, it's, I don't know. I find it like,
I think here's the thing about, like, the nice thing about AI, just AI in general and how it's been created, is you can ask AI to create you an image of anything now. I think somebody needs to solicit a bunch of Seahawks fans, a bunch of 12s, and ask them how they would decorate the VMAC. And then you crowdsource all of that information. You ask AI to design it for you. And then we can see what kind of clusterfuck, like, broke down man cave looking thing it creates, because that's what it's going to look like. It's going to be insane. And I'm on board with this. I want to see.
Normally I would be against you. I'm on board with this. This is a good idea. They should do that. This is why we need
AI. This is how AI.
If you're not a bunch of fucking cowards, Seahawks, you crowdsource the AI prompt that leads to your decorations. I basically feel like I just feel like this is like such a, especially, I mean, we're just so bored. I think that's the deal. We're just so bored. I just want to see football. That's why the draft comes at a perfect time, because you get to like go rehash all this, 2023 season college football, 2023 season pro football. You get to like, it's like looking towards the future. I'm also the kind of guy, by the way, and this is like to lead into your, or to complement your draft guy, information guy thing. I get Madden. I immediately sim through the first season and start building the team myself, first off.
Yeah.
But I cannot touch the sanctity of that season one, because somebody has already done that. That's not me. And if they win the Super Bowl in the year that I sim, Start over. Can't have the computer win a Super Bowl for me, because then I can't move on from the quarterback. That's one. Two, remember the NFL head coach, the game?
Yes.
And you'd be like, who the fuck would play a game like this? Me. I was the kind of guy that played a game like that.
I mean, when I used to play video games like that, I was all about. This is why I preferred NCAA college football as opposed to Madden, because NCAA you had to build the whole team yourself. You
Recruiting,
had to build the
baby.
program, you had to recruit, you had to do all that stuff. I preferred that over the actual gameplay. The gameplay was like a needless distraction in some ways, which then you realize then you're kind of like getting into like the Sims territory, where it's like you're just building a game about nothing, basically.
If you think I didn't have about 7 straight seasons of a game called Baseball Mogul, if you think I didn't have that fucking game, you have another thing coming. You think I didn't try to find an even more complex version of that game that was a little more realistic on the scouting department? Yeah, you got another thing coming, Alex. I am the exact guy you're talking about.
If there's one thing where guys like us are really good at, it's building things nobody gives a shit about. It's like when we were kids and you just take a shovel and you'd go outside and you dig a hole and you'd have so much satisfaction from just digging a hole. Like we do that our whole lives. It never changes.
It's true. Okay. Before we have 2 more topics, then we're going to play the home run game. I do want to get into this because before the season, you gave a lot of criticism to Jerry Dipoto, that he deserves a lot of it, by the way. But there was a move that you fixated on, which was replacing Eugenio Suarez, Gino, as the Anglo tongue prefers, replacing Gino with Luis Arias and Josh Rojas.
Yeah.
And would you be surprised to know that each of those players individually is performing better at the plate? Josh Rojas has been great, by the way. And that's lucky or whatever it is. Josh Rojas has been very good. But even Luis Arias, who has a pretty low batting average, but who has hit for a fair amount of power when he gets a hit, is outperforming Gino, your pal, Mr. Vibes Gino. And I just want an apology to Jerry Dipoto for that specific criticism up to this point.
No,
also, here's what I will say is we talked early about Jared Kelenic having a hot start. And I made the sarcastic joke. Well, he didn't. He's back up, baby. He's hot again. It's frustrating because I was gonna criticize you for your Kelenic, either enthusiasm for him or your lack of enthusiasm for the Mariners. That they have earned. By the way, I'm not. Half of this is like obviously tongue in cheek, just to give you some shit. But he's actually come back around. He still, by the way, has not hit a home run. You know who's letting this team down? It's not Luis Arias, Jorge Polanco, Josh Rojas. It's Julio Rodriguez, who's been playing better of late. It's the guys who were expected to be good, who have been here already, who are playing terribly. And most of this offseason, which has been kind of held up as this horrible example of how a team should build a roster, most of the moves from this offseason have actually so far yielded pretty good returns.
Yeah, and the other thing I liked the Luke Raley move, and they basically haven't released Luke Raley from the bench for whatever reason, so he's obviously done poorly as a result. So it's I guess the way that they constructed the roster is interesting. I still don't know if the combo of Arias and Rojas at third is an answer, as opposed to an everyday third baseman that you had in Suarez, or prior to that, Kyle Seager. But those two have definitely outperformed what you thought they would do up to this point. Having their
you thought they would do. I mean, Arias has been basically exactly what I expected.
I don't think just me. I think a lot of people that looked at that third base situation, you saw the videos come out of spring training, and I still think there's some defensive concerns. I think Rojas defensively is actually pretty good. But he's, he came up as a shortstop, played a lot of second base, and now is at third. So, usually a guy who's got middle infield background can adjust to third a little bit. But by the same token, Luis Arias has middle infield background, and he's been kind of a disaster at third base defensively. He's been getting bailed out a lot. A lot of his throws over to first base are just god awful. And give Ty France some credit. He's made a lot of plays look a little bit easier than maybe they should. with some of those throws that Arias has fed him. But defensively, I think it's still up in the air. I still think that's quite a bit of a downgrade because Gino was a pretty solid defensive third baseman. Offensively, I think it's still a work in progress, but we'll see as time goes by. Will one of these guys cool down? Maybe. I mean, Rojas is batting like 350 or something like that, which is that's certainly not sustainable, and it's not going to keep up. But if he can just, maintain even a notch or two below that, that's going to be very good production for that position. So, it is interesting watching the Mariners kind of develop and see how they're playing. I mean, I think a lot of people are making a big deal out of this recent stretch they've had where they've gotten themselves back to 500 and now actually go into Texas to face the Rangers and have a chance to be in first place in the West.
A real testament to how shitty the West is this year.
Well, and shitty, and not only how it is in general, because the Astros are way down right now. But the last few series the Mariners have played have not really been against world beaters. So they've done what they're supposed to do. They've done like what a 500 ball club does up till this point. They've kind of split some games with teams that are their equals. They have lost games to teams that are superior to them, and they've beaten the teams that are decidedly worse than them. And now they go into this stretch where they have, I think, 4 series in a row against teams that were projected to be pretty good, like upper half of baseball. And what they do against those types of teams is going to be what really dictates, I think, a lot of their season. Because especially when you have these stretches, when you go 4 straight series against presumably good teams, if you come out of that stretch above 500, you're looking pretty good. And if you're below 500, then, people can make some, they can make some decisions about who you are just based on how that performance goes. So, it's going to be interesting to see what they do against better competition, because they have won of late against teams that aren't really that good, and they need to keep it going. Those stretches against bad teams are not just good for helping you get those wins where you can. It also helps you hopefully build momentum so that you carry that into those series against good teams.
I got a statistic for you you're going to like. Luis Arias, 30 plate appearances in 2024.
Mm-hmm.
He has 4 extra base hits. All 4 of his hits have been 3 doubles, 1 home run. Julio Rodriguez, 92 plate appearances. 2024, 3 extra base hits, all doubles.
Yeah.
It's been a tough start for Luis, for Julio Gonzalez. Jesus Christ.
Jesus.
It's been a long weekend, Alex. I drove back from Spokane. I got back at 2 in the morning on Monday morning. And then we have a teething child. We got things that are going bad in this house. Julio Rodriguez has been, like, if you're going to talk about who it falls on, it's not Gino being missing. In fact, I think that's been a net positive. Of course, getting that production out of 2 guys is not as good as getting it out of 1 guy, but I think that's been a net positive. Jared Kelenic, by the way, his numbers are like being held. That's like a paper house. Like, they're ready to fucking collapse. Jesus, a house of cards. My God, Alex, what is going on
Would you like me to talk now?
Please, for the love of God.
Yeah, the Julio thing is a little bit concerning just because it's becoming a trend with him. Last year, this year,
Yeah.
Even if you go back to the very first year he was up, his rookie year, that first month of the season, he didn't do very well. There were a lot of concessions being made. He was getting, I think if you remember his rookie year, that first month, he was getting a lot of calls going against him
Sure.
when it came to the strike zone. And so, people kind of blame that as the reason why he performed badly. But the fact remains, his starts have been poor in all 3 of his seasons to date. And, it's fine if you turn it around, which he has. He's proven he can do that. But it would be nice to see a guy who really kind of props up the entire lineup be able to kind of hit the ground running a little bit more than he has. And for whatever reason, he just hasn't been able to do that. And there's, who knows why that is. Maybe the team has some idea, maybe they don't. But yeah, I mean, this team seems to go as he goes. We saw it last year when he really got hot after the All-Star break last season. The team kind of rallied and almost made the playoffs, right? And it's like, if he had gotten going a little bit earlier, maybe they do make the playoffs. And so it's one of those things where the longer these kind of slumps drag on at the beginning of the year, the more concerning it becomes that there's a trend developing. And you don't want to see that happen with a great player, because that is what separates the great players from guys who just are good and have good numbers here and there. The great players, you're counting on them to take you to the next level. And, you hope Julio can turn it around and figure it out. But, the positive over the last week or so is that while he hasn't hit for power just yet, his average has picked up a little bit. He's been getting a lot of singles. He had a 4-hit day the other day, a lot of singles. And, when Julio hits a single, it's different than most guys. Most guys hit a single and it kind of finds its way between the shortstop and the second baseman or something. When Julio hits a single, that is a missile that's like happens to be 2 feet off the ground. That's a line drive that's harder hit than most people's extra base hits. So, just seeing that and being able to hit the ball hard still is important for him.
Yeah. And one last thing I'll say is there's been, like George Kirby isn't putting up a great ERA. Luis Castillo isn't putting up a great ERA. But all the things, and I'm so far like removed from the analytics world now to know if people have turned on analytics or not. My assumption is that some people have. The analytics say those guys are going to be just fine, basically. Like they're just bad sequencing luck for those two guys specifically.
Kirby's a little concerning because he pitched on Sunday, I believe, in the first game of the doubleheader, and his velocity was down. And he said after the game that he was not 100%. He's been dealing.
That's
with
a concern more than the underlying.
Well, that's what I'm saying. He said he's been dealing with a sore arm, but it was nothing to worry about, and he went out there and pitched still because he knew it was a doubleheader and it was going to be a real burden on the team if a scheduled starter couldn't make his start, which is true. And obviously it raises some concern when a pitcher says he has a sore arm for whatever reason that might be. But I think, when you've grown up and you've played the game, that is a real thing that pitchers can deal with. And the conditions, especially early in the season, can be a little bit cruel to pitchers in a way. You go from throwing the ball every day in 70 plus degrees, dry, sunny weather in Arizona to migrating north to a bunch of different cities where the weather can be very volatile. I mean, you saw it just in this last series for the Mariners in Colorado. They went from days of sub-freezing temperatures where it's snowing to 70 degrees and sunny just because that's how volatile the weather is there. But for a pitcher, that can be especially taxing when you're going back and forth with temperature changes like that. It's tough on the body and tough on the arm. So sure. I guess if Kirby says his sore arm isn't a problem, then I guess we can't assume that it is until it becomes one. But yeah, that is one of those things where it's like anytime a pitcher says he's got some arm bugging him, something going on there, you certainly do get a little worried.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, so we have one final topic to talk about before the home run game, and it's she somehow has become a common topic of this podcast. Since we last talked, Caitlin Clark was drafted first overall by Indiana, and reports have started to come out that she was going to get an 8-figure shoe deal. Also, at the same time as she got drafted, as is kind of expected, her salary became the topic of conversation. And I guess I just want to go give like my thoughts on that first, and then we can move on to the shoe deal, because I think the deal with the WNBA, and I feel like this is a thing that most of the people who want to say it in a way that's like very ineloquent and intentionally said to anger people who but the reality about the WNBA is the WNBA doesn't make any money. And the reason that professional men's basketball players have enough leverage to get as much of the revenue as they do is because the NBA is profitable, and they're largely responsible for it. The WNBA is subsidized by the NBA.
Is it still? I don't know.
It is still. And in fact, it's well, and I think this is all I think we're moving in the right direction on this, by the way. Like, there's a lot of really positive trends in the WNBA, but the last time I looked, it was like the entire salary of the WNBA, all players combined, was like $10 million. And the entire income of the WNBA was negative $10 million. So like the salaries were actually like they were maybe breaking even on every other operational cost except for these salaries. Now, does it look bad that Caitlin Clark is going to make $75,000 as a salary? Well, I understand how it looks bad. The reality is that she's going to make way more than that. And this has been true of sports for a long time. Michael Jordan made whatever his salary was. He made a shitload more in endorsements. Tiger Woods became a billionaire. His career winnings aren't $1 billion. Buick paid him a shitload of money. Like, this is a classic path, especially when you're, and I think that it's also really easy to lump women's basketball in with men's basketball. But I think that, like, from just like a viewership perspective, all this stuff, it's if we viewed it as a different sport, you'd be like, this is an amazing day for that sport because everybody cares about this one athlete. This is like Tiger Woods making golf cool. That's what I would compare it to. Is Tiger Woods made golf cool in the late 90s, early 2000s, and people all got into golf. Now, we didn't have like a gender disparity to compare it to back then, but what's happening with Caitlin Clark is, I think, unarguably the most monumental thing that's happened to women's basketball ever. Not just in my lifetime, but ever. Maybe the difference being like, obviously, like Title IX was pretty fucking monumental to women's basketball. But I mean, like professional basketball in the modern era, she's the biggest thing that's ever happened to it. It's going to create opportunity for all kinds of people. Yeah. And I like this. We have this discussion every time one of these salary issues pops up, and the reality is the games don't sell out, the TV deals aren't as lucrative, the league has historically lost money every year. Maybe they're getting closer to being able to break even with the salaries. That's the reality. I don't think that's going to be that way for very long, but that's the reality that Caitlin Clark. This is like saying that to me this feels like Wilt Chamberlain or Bill Russell. They wore down the path or Jesus, I'm so fucking tired. They were the reasons why
right now
they were pioneers in basketball that made it possible for guys like Michael Jordan to become multimillionaires, right? For LeBron to sign a max deal for $200+ million.
Sure.
The guys that forged that path, they didn't get that money. Like, that's unfair to them. They didn't get that money. Lisa Leslie didn't get that money. Sue Bird didn't get that money. Diana Taurasi didn't get that money. Those players were great players. And now, because of them, partly, and because Caitlin Clark is also so great, people are more interested in women's basketball than they've ever been. This should be a day to celebrate and imagine the possibilities this creates, in my opinion, as opposed to this kind of cynical approach where we all kind of know the truth. We all know how this works. It's been the same way the whole time. There are sports where the women's game makes comparable money to the men in TV revenue, and the players of that sport make comparable money. Women's tennis is a great example. And I think we're headed towards that path. We're headed that direction.
Well, okay. So what's the cynical approach that you're at?
The cynical thing is to go as though this is like two accountants. Like Caitlin Clark and Steph Curry are both two equally experienced accountants at an accounting firm, and the market for an accountant is set by what people are willing to accept for that job, and it's not as transactional as that. It's like a commission-based job or a performance-based job as opposed to this like kind of boilerplate job where the salary is this and you get this much vacation every year. And how many games do they play in the WNBA? I mean, I know that's not going to make up the difference, but they're just like the landscapes are different financially.
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, I think for one thing, the WNBA is like what, 27? It's not even 30 years old yet.
Sure.
And if you think about like where a lot of sports leagues were at 30 years of existence, we're probably in a similar place to where the WNBA is now, where they're maybe just starting to turn the corner to getting their players paid at a rate that not just makes their lives sustainable, because I think you could argue right now that Caitlin Clark makes $75,000. I don't know what like the going rate for a salary is in Indiana, but I imagine that's like probably on par with like most normal jobs in Indiana that
I
you
think
know
that's the national average family salary for some
right, right,
perspective.
exactly. I know that like in where we live in the Seattle area, that's not enough. 75,000 is not considered enough in annual salary to live a comfortable life here. So, depending on where you live in the country, you might look at that salary that WNBA players are making and say, that's great. I would take that. Or you might look at it and say, that's terrible. I can't believe they're
Sure.
doing this to these people. Regardless of how you look at it, the fact remains that it pales in comparison to men's sports or the NBA. And I think there's a multitude of reasons. You said people don't watch the games, and that ends up, driving some of the revenue for teams. I think that certainly could be part of it, but they do have a deal with ESPN, and we know ESPN is basically has empty pocketbooks. I mean, they can do whatever they have deep pockets, is what I'm trying to say. I probably
we're really speaking like champions.
ESPN can afford to pay. We know that TV networks kind of drive a lot of these leagues now. If they wanted to make sure that the players were being paid more, ESPN could dictate that. I think where a lot of
I don't know if I really buy. First off, the idea that the reason they don't make as much money is like partially because of the revenue difference. We could argue the cause of the revenue difference, but that's the reason.
Well, I also think that there's the potential that, like the NBA has a really good collective bargaining agreement. The revenue share that the players get that's where they get a lot of their money. And
But the reason they can command that revenue share is because the league is profitable.
Yeah, and they also negotiated it well. I think the
Yeah.
CBA that the WNBA players have is probably not as good to them as the NBA players' CBA, and maybe that's something that down the road changes with, with more notoriety or with players like Caitlin Clark coming into the league. I think in general you're right that obviously, when you see a player, a generational talent like this come along, they become the rising tide that lifts all the other boats. Michael Jordan coming into the NBA changed NBA, not just like the NBA landscape in general and how people looked at it, but it changed the future for all players. I mean, that's the guys who are like the last man on the bench who are making $10 million a year now can really probably thank Michael Jordan more than anybody else because of the exposure he brought to the NBA and to basketball as a whole. The fact that he got a shoe deal the way he did also kind of just changed how basketball became not just a sport that people watched, but a cultural statement where sneakers are their own fashion and basketball sneakers exclusively.
Sure.
And I think, Caitlin Clark getting what is rumored to be like, I don't know, a $20 million shoe deal.
I saw $28 million today.
Yeah. $28 million deal with Nike. That's a big deal. And it's again, it's not as big as, maybe a men's superstar. And there's, of course, you could argue there's progress to be made there still. But, I remember when I used to work in retail selling athletic shoes, we'd get people come in, girls that play basketball all the time would come into the store and say, hey, do you have any women's basketball shoes? And nobody had women's basketball shoes. We didn't have them. There was like a catalog, and people who are sneakerheads know the East Bay catalog, but the East Bay catalog had like 3 women's basketball shoes. I remember there was a Cheryl Swoop signature shoe, which was like the ugliest basketball shoe you've ever seen. And then there were like 2 other just kind of generic non-signature women's Nike basketball shoes that were available for purchase. And while that might not seem like a big deal, men's and women's shoes, they vary in width a little bit. So it's like the women's shoes, if they were being forced to wear a men's basketball sneaker, it was probably a little roomier than they maybe would have liked, a little wider than they would have liked. And it wasn't built or designed to fit their feet the way that a women's sneaker would have been. So now you got like, there's Sabrina Ionescu has a Nike signature shoe. I was actually playing ball a few weeks back with a guy who was wearing the Sabrina Ionescu basketball shoes. And I was like, this is it. This is equality right here. But he liked the shoe because they looked like Kobe's, and they kind of did. Know, Kobe's are hard to get your hands on, and they usually cost a lot in resale. So he went out and bought the Sabrinas, which no one would have ever known they were Sabrina Ionescu shoes unless he mentioned it. And they fit him well. He liked them. But just having more opportunity and options for people, especially women, that's a huge, huge deal. And then when you think about the money involved, I mean, maybe you start to see more people get these types of deals, get the money that supplements what many would consider to be a lower salary just for playing the game. And from there, that's where you start to see progress. But, more than anything else, there's going to be, I think almost all but 4 of the Indiana Fever games are on national television this year because of Caitlin Clark. You've seen all these stats come out from different cities about their WNBA games that are hosting the Fever are sold out. There's resale tickets, and you can go look up what the resale tickets are for the Storm versus the Fever, but I think they're like incredibly expensive right now from what I've heard. And in other cities, they've taken their games from like their smaller arena and moved it to like a bigger NBA sized arena to accommodate Caitlin Clark and the Fever. And it's like, that's what's going to change the game. And
this is Babe Ruth. That's what I'm saying. This is Babe Ruth of women's basketball. And
it is for now. I mean, like if she gets in the WNBA and just doesn't perform, I mean, there's like this next level you have to go to. It's like when LeBron came into the league, it was like, yes, there was a lot of hype, but if he had not become what LeBron is today, then he would be irrelevant, and that star would have stopped shining and people would have stopped caring. Same thing for Michael Jordan. It's like, it was even different, I would think, back then, because while there was a lot of hype around Michael Jordan, he wasn't the number 1 pick. He wasn't the biggest draw initially, but he became that. So it's interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. And assuming, she can perform at the level she performed in college, then maybe that continues to get that exposure. But just like with anything, this first year, there will be eyes on it. And then from there, it's kind of like what happens next, because after a while, that sheen of the new toy just wears off and people just don't gravitate towards it as much. You see it with any new thing. I mean, any sport, any team, whatever.
I mean, I understand there's a chance for this to become like the Michelle Wie story, and it's someone who just never reaches their or Freddie Adu was another guy like in soccer. They're like, this guy's going to revolutionize American soccer, and then he just never reached the potential that everyone put on him. I understand there's that there. It's a little different because both those people were professionals as minors. This is a college senior. This is a person who has a game that I think translates incredibly well. Like, I have basically no doubt that she's going to be a productive WNBA player. And I guess I could be wrong about that, but the chances I think are pretty high that if she stays healthy, she'll be a good player. And I think so. Then the last part of this before we get to the home run game is the immediate reaction to this is to kind of take these sports issues and then to kind of re-examine them through a lens that's like, so this became for Jemele Hill, who I think is someone, again, like this may be surprising, but Jemele Hill's been historically like one of my favorite people to hear talk about sports on ESPN. I listen to she does interviews with Dan Le Batard somewhat often. I listened, she had a podcast a while back. I'm like trying desperately to cut my podcast consumption down, period, because there's only so many hours in the day, but I listen. She's someone who I really respect as a journalist. And even by the way, like I said, I disagree with her. And I think that sometimes she's doesn't necessarily vet out every opinion, I guess I would say, incredibly well. In this case, I think that's the case. She said, is it, and you may know this or you may not, I think that might actually kind of point to what I'm saying. Is it A'ja Wilson who was A'ja Wilson? Yeah. Basically she said like, Caitlin Clark gets her own shoe. A'ja Wilson, who is a 2-time league MVP, 2-time WNBA champion, 2-time defensive player of the year, finals MVP, a 5-time WNBA All-Star game, and a best-selling author, is probably somewhere like, and it's a fast food worker on break. That's like the joke, is that she's got to have another job. And then someone responded, she's not as marketable. Let's not make this a race thing, because it's not that at all, is what they said. And then Jemele Hill said, why isn't A'ja Wilson marketable? College grad, national, I should have this on screen so other people can read it too, but national and WNBA champion, best-selling author, Olympic gold medalist. What is she missing? I'm happy to entertain any substantive ideas. And to that I say, like, you give the resume, but that doesn't matter. Like
this is where I would contest. I definitely get what you're getting at, because at the beginning of this, what I was thinking was Tim Duncan. Tim Duncan was always this case of like, why doesn't this guy get more exposure? Because he's a champion, and he was a great college player. He played on Team USA, and I remember Tim Duncan had an Adidas shoe for a few years, and it was shitty. It was just a terrible shoe. I remember it being on sale everywhere for like $20. Nobody wanted the Tim Duncan shoe because bigs didn't sell, right? That was always a thing in the sneaker game. Big men didn't sell sneakers. It was guards, it was wings, athletic guys who could jump that kids could like see themselves in, even though there was no possible way some little kid from the middle of nowhere was going to become, the next Michael Jordan. But what I would argue with somebody like Asia Wilson is she hasn't had the exposure. And until this year with Caitlin Clark, there just hasn't been the exposure for any women's basketball player. And that's the thing that is like, there's good and bad here. The good is that you are choosing to expose somebody. The bad is that you haven't chosen to expose people in the past.
Two quick things about this. One, Asia Wilson did have a shoe that was like inspired by her. So it wasn't a signature shoe, but here's the deal. Marketability is not is like measurable, right? Caitlin Clark is changing the economics of women's basketball.
I mean, you could
because
argue,
she's so marketable. Does she have? You give me the resume. I don't give a shit. Like I don't think it's fair.
What made her marketable?
I don't know. Honestly, it's not just being white because Sue Bird was white. Like Diana Taurasi is white, and they're dynamic players.
I'm not.
No, Jamel Hill's saying it's because she's white. I'm not saying you are.
If Jamel's saying that it's a race thing, that's fine. But aside from the race thing, I mean, you can argue that what made Caitlin Clark marketable is that networks started propping her up and talking about her. ESPN started talking about Caitlin Clark because ESPN had the contract for the women's NCAA tournament. It's in their interest to market her. Sure. That hasn't always been the case. So in the past, it hasn't been in their best interests to market players. When it becomes financially motivating and financially beneficial to them, then they market these people.
But this isn't welfare. This is like
but she happens
it's earned
to be
interest.
The benefit. She happens to be the benefit.
Yeah,
she's
absolutely.
in the right place at the right time. Take race out of it. She's in the right place at the right time to capitalize on this machine that has the ability to make anybody famous if they want. And I think the argument is probably less about race, although you could say like, if you want,
that's not my argument. That's Jamel Hill's argument.
But I mean, having raised it on her behalf, it is now an argument about race. So it becomes like you could compare like an Angel Reese to a Caitlin Clark, which I've seen people do, and there's real conversations to be made there. However we got to this point, however we got to Caitlin Clark mania.
Wait, one last thing. Asia Wilson. And this might be because of the pressure of this type of thing. She's getting a signature shoe.
Yeah, so it works. Now. It's not the best way to get there for sure. I mean, there's no good way to say it, but like, again, it's the rising tide that lifts all boats, and I totally understand why some people can feel a certain kind of way about it, and fair or unfair. Yeah, I mean, I can understand why it's unfair.
To me, the thing about it is it tarnishes this moment where it's like,
but what? Like, who cares? Who cares if it tarnishes the moment?
Because we watch sports because we like these kinds of things, these like inspirational moments. I mean, we watch for a lot of reasons, but and it's obviously the dynamics are somewhat similar, but it's like saying. It's like when people are like Babe Ruth wasn't actually good because they didn't allow black players in the league.
I mean,
and that's not true. There is an absolute sin being committed, but it is not related to Babe Ruth.
No, I just, to me, it's like we've chosen in the social media era to give everybody basically an equal voice. And it's like anytime any athlete does something good now, you'll see it especially with the draft. Anytime somebody gets drafted, there's 1,000 people out there that go dig through their old tweets to try and find the one bad thing they said when they were like a teenager, and then prop it up and make them into a villain because of it. That's a thing that we all do. But at the same time, you could argue that person chose to say something on a public forum that is bad, knowing what they were doing, knowing that thing could live forever. So because of the ecosystem we've created here, you can feel bad that a moment is tarnished, but we've chosen to make it that way. everyone's going to co-opt these things for their own benefit. When something gets as big as Caitlin Clark, you're going to take that because you know that's a hot topic and use it to advance whatever it is you're trying to advance. That's
sure
what we do.
Some
now.
people are. What I'm saying is I have more respect for Jemele Hill than someone who's just grifting off of. I genuinely don't think she's like grifting off of social issues. And there's a lot of things I've agreed with her on. Like, I think her stances on Colin Kaepernick are basically directly in line with mine. Like I agree with her on a lot of stuff. And even like Colin Kaepernick, that is like a racialized issue. And I agree with her on that. On this one, I think it's like, take the fucking win. And every single player in the NBA, white or black, is going to make more money because Caitlin Clark has, from whatever means, has this level of interest.
I think what Jemele Hill is saying, and I agree with, is that it's unfair that it took a white girl to lift this situation for black women. That's what I think. It's not, and that is unfair. Whether you agree with it or not, it's unfair that it took a Caucasian person to benefit black people.
I get what you're saying, except for it's been nobody else. And also it's been nobody else that's done this, but also it's been black women that have lifted, like Lisa Leslie. Like I was saying about Wilt Chamberlain, like Wilt Chamberlain is responsible for Larry Bird having a higher salary.
Yeah.
Is that fair or not fair? I don't know. But
it can work both ways. But it doesn't change the fact that what she's saying is right. That's all I'm saying. It's like, whether
what is fair? What do you mean fair? Like it's the.
I mean,
fair,
she's taking it as
she unfair. Just is the best college basketball. By the way, we had a discussion about the best college basketball players in history, and you brought up two names. I went and looked them up. You're a silly guy. Those guys, they like that lady. It's amazing the complete stat line Caitlin Clark's putting up on average. She's not only all-time leading scorer in basketball in women's basketball history, but also like 7 assists a game, 7 rebounds a game. This is an all-time talent. It's like, had she been, by the way, like, I like Angel Reese. I'm more of a fan of Angel Reese than I am. Like, her trolling of Caitlin Clark, I thought that was fucking hilarious. I thought that was great. I hope that rivalry is Jordan versus Bird or Magic versus Bird for decades.
Here's what I think, because we're running out of time.
Yeah.
But we're not going to play the home run game. There's just no way.
You can.
But here's the thing. I think the way that our friend Ben Coog was kind enough to get me a Coog hat to wear, somebody needs to get you a Caitlin Clark jersey to wear.
Oh, boy. I'll wear a Caitlin Clark jersey.
Yeah. Well, first of all, a guy of your
I'd rather have an Angel. Give me an Angel Reese jersey.
A guy of your stature looks great in any basketball jersey. We know that. So who better to represent than Caitlin Clark? Someone out there, if you could pick Casey a Caitlin Clark jersey, maybe what you need to do is incorporate her into your act somehow so that somebody would maybe bring one to a show. Like a Caitlin Clark joke of some sort.
Dude, if I can get Caitlin Clark or Angel Reese to come to a comedy show, that would be my ultimate dream.
Okay. Well, I hope it happens for you. We'll do whatever we can here to help facilitate, but we have to go. I'm out of time.
You have to go. I'm going to stay and give my plug. If you want to go, Alex, I'm going to give a couple dates that I have upcoming. Thank you for joining us, Alex. And we'll see you. We got to commit to a Thursday at least earbud.
We'll see.
Appearance.
We'll see what happens.
Oh
yeah.
God,
if the people demand it, I'll need at least 100 people to demand it. All right. We'll talk to you next week.
All right, and come see me this weekend at a comedy bar in Seattle, Capitol Hill on Friday, the Prineville Theater. And let me see if I can very quickly pull up dates. I will pull up a couple more. I will be at the Chehalis Theater on May 10th, opening for Brian Bates, doing a 30-minute clean set. Black Raven Brewing in Redmond, Washington, headlining on May 11th. And then we have this weekend also on April 26th, the Bickerson Show. I'm not going to be there for that, but on May 18th, I'm back hosting. It's been a while since I've been to Bickerson's in Renton, but this weekend we have Vanessa Dawn headlining and my pal Ryan McComb on May 18th. Follow us on YouTube and Twitter, and please subscribe so you know when we go live. And now I'm just trying to stall and talk my way out of this as I prepare to dismount from this podcast. Thank you for listening. We couldn't do this without you. I love